Good evening. Good evening to each of you. I am Dr. Corrine Johnson, and I would like to welcome you on tonight to day number 58 of the 60-day marriage challenge. Good evening to each of you and welcome. And we are so excited about you all tuning in and joining with us on tonight. Go ahead on and like, tag, and share this video with some people that that need help when it comes down to their marital relationship. And so on tonight, day number 58 of the challenge, we're going to be talking about resolving conflict, because whether we know it or not, there are steps that we can take to manage conflict within your marriage. And a lot of times, the conflict keeps going on and on because we find ourselves being critical. We find ourselves being mad and not talking to one another about things. Instead of working out the difference of opinions and trying to change any negative feelings that you may have towards your spouse, a lot of us are just silent. We have settled for walking around and being mad with one another for days and days on end. Many of us are not willing to take the time and the effort to work through resolving conflict in your marriage. And so on tonight, I want to share with you some mistakes to avoid when resolving conflict in your marriage. Okay. The first mistake that I want you to avoid when it comes to resolving conflict in your marriage is to make sure that you're not staying mad. Because if there is a disagreement or if there's some conflict, if you stay mad about things that keep coming up in the relationship, there may be better ways to resolve the conflict. You could just simply go to your mate and talk to your mate about your feelings instead of walking around acting like a 2-year old and being mad at them all the time, right? And so when you can begin to hear your mate's point of view on whatever the matter is, it may make a big difference in how you feel. But you cannot get their point of view if you're not willing to talk to them. If you're just walking around with your lips poked out and you're mad about whatever the situation is, you got to take time to make sure that you hear their point of view. Because once again, it may shift your whole perspective about whatever the issue may be. The second mistake on tonight that I want you to avoid when resolving conflict in your marriage is making more conflict. Because when we begin to just simply research, it indicates that the more time married couples spend arguing, the more they may feel unsatisfied with their relationship. And so this is why you should do your best to prevent adding more conflict when it's not necessary. And so that may mean you having to choose your battles wisely. Think about speaking up. When something is bothering you, gently, instead of getting upset and starting to fight because of how you feel. And so, in other words, once again, choose your battles wisely. There's some things that you don't even have to really, even reply to. There's some things that you don't even have to react to. You got to learn how to choose your battles wisely. And so the next thing on tonight, the next mistake to avoid when resolving conflict is trying to win. Because a lot of times in marriage, we find ourselves trying to win arguments, right? And so if this is something that you often do, you got to make sure that you refrain from doing this, because in some cases there is no winning in an argument. So it can be more beneficial to do everything that you can do to work through any issues and problems you face together, instead of seeing it as you versus, your mate. You and your spouse need to team up, because you're supposed to be a team, and it should be the two of you against whatever the situation may be. The fourth thing on tonight to avoid when resolving conflict is blaming your mate. And that's another major conflict resolution tip that you should follow, is to stop blaming your mate, because there may be times when you're having a disagreement with your spouse where you end up telling them that something was their fault, and this isn't fair to them, and it could lead to them blaming you for something the next time you disagree. And so you got to make sure that you try your best to say what you have to and hear your spouse out and stop with the blame game. Sit down and talk like two mature adults and stop blaming one another, and sit down and talk so you all can come up with a resolve, and stop also not paying attention. Because when the time comes for you and your spouse to talk through your disagreements or to work through things, some of y'all don't even pay attention to what they have to say. And so you likely wouldn't want him or her to ignore you, right? So you must give your spouse your full attention. And so as you're giving them your full attention, you got to make sure that you're willing to compromise. Because as you're talking to your spouse, or each time a conflict comes up, you should resolve, to start compromising. When you talk to your spouse, each time y'all have had an argument, make sure that you're willing to compromise so that both of you can get what you want and not just one person. For instance, if you want your husband to help you around the house more, you can tell them exactly what chores you need help with, and they can come to your aid. And then this could help in resolving conflict overall if you just open up and tell them what you need. Now, they may not be able to give you everything that you need, but you need to learn how to be thankful for whatever it is that they're willing to do. The next mistake that we need to avoid when resolving conflict is keeping it bottled up. We need to avoid that at all costs, because when you don't let your feelings out, this leads to you're getting very angry and stressed out, at different times. You don't want to lash out at your spouse when you're frustrated. So it's better to let your feelings out whenever possible. And be sure to allow your spouse to talk to you about what's happening with them when needed. Because a lot of times, some of you all have disagreements and conflict, and you don't even respond to it. You just walk around the house mad and angry, and you got all of these feelings bottled up in you. And then when your spouse triggers or hit a particular button, then you explode like a volcano all at one time, and you get them for the old, what they did the day before, what you think they're gonna do in the future, and you just go off and you explode. So avoid keeping your feelings bottled all up and learn how to talk. Now, this next one and this last one is very, very important when it comes down to conflict, and you want to avoid it at all costs, and that is ignoring the issue. You cannot ignore the issue thinking that it's going to go away, because when you ignore your feelings about a situation or do everything you can do not to have a conflict with your mate, this may cause other issues to start popping up, right? So when you need to talk about something or have a different opinion from your mate, it's okay to talk things out. Stop ignoring the issue. Stop ignoring the problems. Because if something is bothering you, you need to learn how to talk about it and stop talking about, oh, I'm just going to keep the peace. No, you need to open up your mouth and say what it is. You know, you got to be open. You got to be honest. You got to keep communication open in your marriage, even if you don't want to disagree with your mate. And so on tonight, you know, it's time to resolve conflict in your relationship. And I have given you some mistakes to avoid when resolving that conflict. And so I want to challenge you on tonight to begin to make sure that you're avoiding every last one of these things that I've mentioned on tonight when it comes down to conflict. Because once again, if there's an issue, it's not going to go away because you sweep it up under the rug or because you ignore it. Over time, it's going to come up again and again and again until you come to a resolve, until you sit down and be open and honest and communicate about whatever the issue may be. And so on tonight, day number 58 of the 60-day marriage challenge, resolve those issues that you have and make sure that when you're in the midst of conflict, that you're not making any of the mistakes. You know, you want to avoid these pitfalls that we talked about on tonight. And so thank you all so much for tuning in with me on tonight. And remember to join in with my husband. He'll be on at 8 o'clock with the Ephesians 5 daily devotion for the husband. So join in with him as well. And on tomorrow night, if it's the will of the Lord, for day number 58, I'm going to give you some strategies for resolving conflict. Tonight, we talked about things to avoid, you know, when it comes down to conflict, the mistakes to avoid. But on tomorrow night, I want to give you some strategy to help you and challenge you to use those strategies for resolving conflict. So once again, thank you all so much for tuning in and joining with me on tonight. And if it is the will of the Lord, we will see you on tomorrow night for day number 59 of the 60-day marriage challenge. God bless you and have a great evening.